1916 by the American Bridge and Iron Company in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, and it was used by the Central of Georgia Railroad in Macon, Georgia at the locomotive back shops. That is up until 1925 when they moved it to Cedartown, Georgia, where it was used at the end of a branch line. Now, we acquired this turntable in the 1980s, moved it to this location, and we've been using it here ever since. This turntable is 80 feet long, and it weighs in at 80 tons. Now, keep in mind the average school bus only weighs about 12 or 13 tons. But that locomotive and tender, fully loaded with coal and water, weighs in at 215 tons. So when it's on top of the table here, the overall weight between the two is going to be sitting very close to 300 tons. So it'll probably surprise you to know that this turntable was originally turned by hand. It was an Armstrong table. There would have been poles extending off each end, and it would have taken at least 4 people to push those poles to spin the table around. But of course, I'm not about to ask for volunteers. We don't do it that way anymore. Instead, today we use a small 25 horsepower electric motor under the operator's shed here that our conductor Travis will be operating. Now, do keep in mind that this turntable, like I said, is 80 feet long. With a wheelbase on that locomotive, it's 78 feet. From front coupler to back coupler, it's a lot more than 80 feet. So the locomotive will be overhanging each end of this turntable. So if you're at that yellow line, I do need you to take an extra few steps back because that front coupler will be hanging off the front side of that rope there as it comes around. The locomotive pulling our train today is the Southern Railway 4501, built in 1911 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was built for the Southern Railway as a mainline freight locomotive, and it did that for many decades before it was sold off to the Kentucky and Tennessee Railway in Stearns, Kentucky, where it was used to haul coal down from the mines down to the mainline interchange with the Southern Railway. It was in the 60s that the locomotive was again retired and then purchased by one of our co-founders here at the museum, Paul Merriman, for $5,000 of his own cash, brought to Chattanooga under its own power, and has been operating both here at the museum and on mainline excursions on and off ever since. Now, this is the larger of our 2 operating steam locomotives. You saw the other on the way over. You'll see it again on the way back as we pass it once more. This locomotive here is a 282, meaning it has 2 pilot wheels in the front, 8 driving wheels in the middle, and 2 trailing wheels under the cab and firebox. This was the very first 282 ever purchased by the Southern Railway of hundreds they would eventually purchase, and ironically enough, it is the only Southern Railway 282 that still survives today. So it was the first and the last. Now, this locomotive operates at 205 psi. It has 63-inch diameter driving wheels, and it produces 53,900 pounds of tracted effort, the equivalent of about 2,500 horsepower. Now, if you look up in the cab here, you'll see our engineer, Brian. He's responsible for operating this locomotive and getting us here and back safely today. So everyone, go ahead and give him a wave. Now, the way this locomotive works is up on the cab there, our fireman Ricky is feeding 3 to 6 tons of coal a day into the firebox where it is burning. On the front side of the firebox, there are a series of tubes that will run the entire length of the boiler. Those are called the flues. The hot gases from the fire will through the flues and then out of the stack. Running the flues from the firebox. It is rotating those rods, therefore turning the driving wheels and propelling the locomotive. After that steam has been used, it mixes with the hot gases in the smoke box at the front of the locomotive, and then it shoots up and out the stack. And that exhausting steam is what actually creates the chugging sound you hear when you see a steam locomotive. Now, you probably noticed our train is still sitting over there on that by that depot on track number 1. But what we're going to do here is run the locomotive up to track number 2, and that is so we can do what's called a runaround. Now, what that means is the locomotive will go past our train on track number 2 and then through a switch. It will then reverse through that switch back into track number 1 to recouple to the opposite end of the train. So what was the front will become the back and vice versa for the return trip. Now that you can see the other side of the cab, if you look out there, you'll see our fireman, Ricky. She is responsible for maintaining that fire as well as the water level in the boiler to produce all the steam needed for the engine to operate. Without her, we would not be going anywhere today, so give her a wave as well. Now, this other locomotive you see sitting next to our turntable here, that is the 610. It was built in 1952 by the Baldwin Railroad Corporation. operation for the U.S. Army. It was the last steam locomotive built for domestic use in this country, and it was used by the Army as a training locomotive used to teach them how to operate steam. That locomotive ran here from 1990 till 2011, and it's yet to be determined whether that locomotive will see operation again in the future or not. And now that we've got our locomotive lined up for track number 2, for those of you that would like to see our back shop, you can follow me. We're going right behind our train here. We'll take a right turn over that crossing and go to the large building in the distance. Those of you that don't want to see the back shop can feel free to reboard the train at any time or visit the depot. But as I said, if you do want to see that